All right, good evening, everybody. All right, good evening. We're going to have to get started here, guys. It's kind of a sad and time to say bye to Don. This is his last night with us. It's been a great meeting, Don, as I think everybody here would say so as well. We've had a wonderful week. We want to welcome our visitors here. We've had several this week while Don's been with us, and it's just been a wonderful series here on apologetics through geology and all the proofs that we've got of the Bible and what God has told us all along. So it's been very encouraging, I think we can all say to everybody, and we'll thank you, Don, and wish you luck in your travels coming up. Tonight's lesson will be from the fossil record, and we're looking forward to that because Don says it's one of his favorites that he likes to teach, so we know it's going to be extra good. So tonight, let's remember who we are as we go into the worship service, that the Lord is here in our presence, and we want to remember that. And we'll have a closing song. Do we have it's okay, it's going to be on the boards tonight, so you don't have to grab a songbook. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over at this time to Don, and we'll move on.
It's been a real pleasure to be with you. And I'll be able to tell you more about that once I get my mic on. I was pleasantly surprised to learn that I knew a lot of folks here, and a lot of folks that I knew folks here, connected all over the place. You run into people that you don't expect to see and don't expect to have them know you, and you just have to behave yourself no matter where you go. But it's been a joy and a pleasure. We want to talk to you tonight about the fossil record. It is definitely one of my favorite subjects, and if I'm going to debate anyone, I'm going to debate this subject. I think it is the most defensible. And you might just imagine as we go through what you would say if you were an evolutionist. How would you respond to that? I don't think they've got a response. Many Christians are intimidated by the fossil record. We're told that the fossils prove evolution, and that's just associated with evolution. Young people are told that continually through school, usually without proof, and some proof that we'll look at, so-called, that's not proof at all. It is the most critical evidence if we're going to prove what happened in the past. But evolution is not supported by the fossils. The fossils speak very plainly and very eloquently of creation. But the fundamental critical aspect of it is emphasized by S.M. Stanley, one of the more famous paleontologists in our country, for Johns Hopkins. He said the fossil record, and only the fossil record, provides direct evidence of major sequential changes. Now, if there's going to be major sequential changes, this is the only way you can prove it. And yep, that's the only direct evidence. And without that, he goes on to say, it's doubtful whether in the absence of fossils, the idea of evolution would represent anything more than an outrageous hypothesis. I don't agree with him very often, but I think he's dead on here. And I would ask you to remember that statement. Without the fossils, It's just an outrageous hypothesis. And they are without the fossils. And I think you can see that before we're finished. But how would you look at the fossils, a bunch of dead things in rocks, and tell whether it supports creation or evolution? One of the ways we proceed in science is to make predictions and then to see if the facts support this or don't support it. This view or that view is supported best by the evidence, the predictions. And there are very definite predictions that are made, contrasting predictions, made by the creationist and by the evolutionist. If you're an evolutionist, you expect it to begin simple and then get more complex through time. If you're a creationist, no, you got it all to start with and it deteriorates. Now that's just very opposite, and we ought to be able to look at the fossils and tell which works best. In the beginning particularly, there should be a way to see the difference, a very different prediction. Simple, gradual, linked would be the prediction of the evolutionist, followed by the allied continuums and the progression up to more complex. Distinct and separate, stasis, we get status quo from that. It means it stays the same, just basically the opposite of evolution. And I think we should be able to see that in the fossil record. Which fits the facts? Well, I can tell you that the one on the right is exactly what you see. And that wouldn't impress a lot of evolutionists or creationists. That's what you would say. And so we're going to see what the evolutionists say. But there's another aspect of the predictions that we should look at. They're involving similarities. They don't look at alternative views often. If it's similar, it's evolved. Went from this to that. I think we should consider alternatives, and the fact that, yes, both predict similarities, but similar, that is very different, distinct similarities. The evolutionist predicts this gradual branching pattern, kin, relationships, obvious, whereas there are similarities predicted by creation, but not connected like the branching pattern, but like the mosaic. You got a red tile here because that's where the designer wanted it, and a red tile here because he wanted it likewise. But connected? No, it's just where the designer wants it. And if they're not connected, it looks more like a design. So let's look at the record and allow the evolutionists themselves to tell us what the record is. I'll just back out of the way and let them tell you. The quotes that we'll be using are all from devout believers, but believers in evolution. Now, sometimes people misunderstand. You're quoting these people and they don't agree with you. Yeah, well, that's the point. They don't acknowledge the difficulties unless they have to. They are men of great faith in evolution. And if you have had experience in the legal realm, you understand the difference between friendly testimony and acknowledgments contrary to interest, which are about 10 times more valuable in terms of weighing the evidence. Your friend may agree with you, but he's your friend. That's okay, you kind of expect that. But if you got the enemy that has to admit the point, yep, that's worth more in terms of evidence. So we're not misrepresenting these people. These people are devout evolutionists. But here's what they acknowledge contrary to their interest. For example, regarding the beginning of the fossil record, Richard Dawkins, Cambridge, often referred to as the Pope of evolution, writing in The Blind Watchmaker, which tells you where he's coming from, that's what he believes, is talking about the bottom layer, the beginning, which is the most critical part of our evidence. He says we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution the very first time they appear. Now, how does he know it's a state of evolution if it's the first time they appear and they're advanced? Well, that's just a matter of faith showing through. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. Now, it's an evolutionary appearance, but it's without any evolutionary history. It's without the evidence, but it's... Anyway, he tells us how it starts. Now, if I had written the story, just making it up to fit creation, I don't think I could have done a much better job. He says, needless to say, this appearance of sudden planting has delighted the creationist. In other words, this is what they predict. And I'll plead guilty. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's exactly what we would expect, and that's what we find. When we're talking about the beginning, it is what is described here by National Geographic, which is certainly not a friendly publication to creationists, as an explosion. Boom. That's not the simple, slow, gradual beginning predicted by the evolutionist. Stephen Gould, one of the most often quoted paleontologists, recently deceased, of Harvard, says the Cambridge explosion occurred in a geological moment. All major anatomical designs, we caught him using the word he doesn't believe, but that's what it looks like, may have made their evolutionary appearance. Boom, there it is, but it's an evolutionary appearance at that time. All the major anatomical designs, boom, right at the start. Well, who predicted that? Not the evolutionist, but that's the way it begins. The Cambrian is that lowest layer, and it's an explosion, and you got it all. He says not only the phylum Chordata, that's the major biological division, that's us, animals with backbones, not only this highest order, but all the major divisions. Slow, gradual development, not what we see, even according to the devout evolutionist. Contrary, he goes on to say, to Darwin's expectations, or we would say predictions. Not what they predict, it's what we predict. Again, if I were writing this, I don't think I could have done a better job if I was just making it up to fit our view. This is from the devout evolutionist. Since, and it gets worse for them, since the so-called Cambrian explosion, no new phyla of animals have entered the fossil record. Boom, you got all the major anatomical designs right at the start, and no new ones since. How do you get evolution out of that? It's an evolutionary history in spite of what the facts are, as they acknowledge the facts. And it's interesting to see from time to time, people maybe not realizing the creationists are listening, just say it like it is. There's Maxwell Maltz of the University of Texas. The Cambrian explosion, it wasn't a gradual development of complexity. That's what they predict, but that's not what it is. That's pretty straightforward. Instead, these things suddenly seem to burst out of a magic box. Wow. I don't have to tell you which model is served best by the evidence here. Fairly recently here, 2012, from the journal Evolutionary Biology. You know where they're coming from. The fossils from the Cambrian period can cause a real headache for evolutionary biologists. Doesn't fit. That's a problem. You expect simple organisms evolving over time to become increasingly more complex. That's the prediction. And that's the way science tests things, make predictions. See how, that's what you predict. However, during the Cambrian period, there was an apparent explosion of different major groups of animals, all appearing simultaneously. And that's why it's a headache. It is not what they predict. And they say so. That's not just me. We can summarize it this way. Here's the geologic column. Down at the bottom, the most critical part of evaluating the difference from fossils. burst out of a magic box, complex, suddenly right at the start, a real headache for evolutionary biologists. They're advanced, just planted without any evolutionary history. All the major anatomical designs, where? Right down there at the bottom. And since the Cambrian explosion, no new phyla. And that's not from me, that's from the antagonistic witness, contrary to their interest. Now, if you're in debate and you have to meet that, what are you going to say? I've listened to them. They don't have anything to say. They quit debating, is their response. This is, according to them, the way it starts, the most critical part of the evidence, and it does not favor them. Evolution is not what the fossils are saying. It's saying just exactly what the creationists expect. But this is what we see in the textbooks. In the textbook, here you've got the single animal and just gradually, and that's what it should be if evolution is the case. But what's up at the top? The chordata. That's what starts with all of the major divisions. At the bottom, you just turn it upside down, and it's pretty close to what they describe as the beginning. Gould comments on the contrast. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of the fossils. That's pretty obvious. When you turn it upside down and it works better, it's not fitting your view. But this is what is published. It's not the evidence of the fossils. So when you see that, just understand that's not the fossils. And that's not just me saying it. That's the leading authority. Now, to be fair, there is a reason why this is arranged this way. It's not the fossils. We have arranged, this is from Evolution of the Earth, geology text. I was actually taught from it at 2 different state universities. We've arranged the groups in a traditional way. How did it get that way? We arranged it that way. You kind of saw a little bit of that last night with the columns. And here is the order of the development of the fossils, the tree of life. How did it get? Well, we arranged it that way in the traditional way. The simplest forms first, the progressively more complex groups following. And he says this is arbitrary. But the fundamental principle, and really what it's all about when we're looking at the fossils and evaluating the record, they're alike because they're related. It's the similarities that tell the story for them. Otherwise, you just got dead things in rocks. Well, you see similarities. That allows them to arrange it into the tree, not because of where the fossils are found or the order of their appearance, but because that's the order of evolution, and so they arrange it that way. They're related, and so they arrange it according to that, which they say, but as we'll see, and we'll be, when you're talking about fossils, and you get past the obvious problems with the beginning, then it's all about similarities. It's not about, well, the things that you might think, but similarities is the ballgame. So that's what we're going to be talking about for most of the rest of the sessions. Yep, we can see similarities, right? We won't get personal, but you can look around the room and you can see confirmation that, yep, there's some similarities. The question that we need to ask, and one of the beginning points for good scientific discussion is why. And evolutionists do not ask that question when they look at similarities. They know, and they only consider one evaluation. It's because they're genetically related. And that's not the only explanation for similarities, which should be obvious from this diagram. Why? Well, it's because of common genetics. No, I don't think so. You drive down the subdivision, you see houses that look alike, and you see, well, that's common designer, and a common designer would create similar forms for similar functions for all forms, but the hand, the newt hand, comes from segments 2 through 5. The lizard hand comes from segments 6 through 9. The human hand, pendactyl form, is 13 through 8. It's totally different genetics. Comes from different parts of the embryo. It is not common genetics. It's contradicted by the beginning genetics. Notice, as we ask that question, why, director of the British Museum of Natural History, Sir Gavin De Beer, who's professor of embryology, just says the attempt to find homologous genes has been given up as hopeless. Homology is what we're looking at here. Homologous forms, yes. Homologous genes, no. But you're explaining the forms because of common genes. No, doesn't work that way. And so common genetics really doesn't work that well. We explain at least as well, and then looking close, well, we've got a distinct advantage because theirs does not work well at all. Yet, this is what we see published in the books as propaganda to the exclusion of alternatives. And we're talking about similarities. As we're talking about, it's because of similarities, but one of the similarities that you'll hear referred to continually is the outdated claim begun by Richard Dawkins that chimpanzees and we share 99% of our genes. Have you heard that? I see a bunch of nods going on. If you listen to Ken Ham and Nye, the science guy, that was one of his big arguments. It's similar. The fact that it's similar proves his point, he thinks. Well, but this is a grossly outdated claim 37 years ago, and it's been updated over and over again in the scientific literature. Here from 2007, the title of the article in Science, Relative Differences, the Myth of 1%. Difference of one? No, that's a myth. They go on to say there are chunks of missing DNA, extra genes. The very structure of the chromosomes confound any quantification. How do you say 20%, 10%? It's so different you can't even say a percentage. Confound any quantification of chimpness versus humanness. Then Nature, even more updated here, 2010, says the comparison now reveals they differ radically, talking about chimps and humans, the DNA, in sequence, structure, and gene content. Differ radically. That doesn't sound like 1% difference, does it? Why? Chimpanzee genome is 10 to 15% longer. Okay, well, that blows it out of the water just from the start. 50% of the human genes are missing from the chimp. But you look in the textbooks, they'll all say 1% difference, or maybe 2. 1/3 more gene categories and entirely different classes of genes. Now, somebody tells you that they're just 1 to 2% difference. Either they don't know what they're talking about, or they're not telling you the truth. When you look at similarities, you say, oh, okay, that looks similar, and it seems to be, but that can be skewed. As Mark Twain says, figures don't lie, but liars do figure. And it's just very deceitful. Look, the argument that's made often in the textbooks involves the number of chromosomes. With this kind of a sequence, Penicillium is 2 chromosomes. Honeybee is 16. We got 46, more than the alligator at 32. See, this looks like a progressive continuum, which is what they predict. And it looks impressive, doesn't it? But you look at all the rest of they just select what they want you to see. I think very deceitfully, because you look at the rest of the evidence. The fern has 480 chromosomes. The turkey's got 82, twice as many as we do. The amoeba's got 50. We got 46. The human has 40. You get the rest of the story, and it all falls apart. Well, we're not disagreeing with the facts that they presented. That's true, but it's half of the truth, which is extremely deceitful, intentional. Now, when you're dealing with similarities, that's the kind of thing that you see continually. For example, and similarities is what it's about, and it's deceitful. Here are two fish that look similar, right? I see some nods. I caught you. They're not. They're similar, but one's a reptile and one's a mammal. You got a porpoise and an ichthyosaur. They're not related at all. And so they say similarity indicates common ancestry, except when it doesn't. And it doesn't, a lot of times, which is not what they include. They just kind of leave that part out. Let me show you some similarities that are not in the textbook. Man's relationship shows this relationship with the chimpanzees that we're supposed to evolve from. And you look at blood serum, this is one of their prime examples. Yep, there's some similarity there. Very, in fact, with the right antiserum, you can actually interchange and we can use blood serum. That's a good piece of evidence that would favor until you look at the rest of the evidence. Instead of blood serum, let's look at milk chemistry, which ought to be as definitive and not like the chimpanzees at all. It's a whole lot like the donkey. Well, we look around the room and maybe we see some similarities there, but that's not what they're predicting, is it? Milk chemistry, we've learned a lot about it recently, and you can't imagine we're the most similar, even superior to our milk chemistry. You believe that? That's the cockroach. He gets around when you talk about similarity. Here in Science News 2016, got milk. Roach milk could be a new superfood. You think that'll catch on? Cockroach milk is among the most nutritious substances on earth. It's 3 times richer in calories than buffalo milk, previous top contender. No, that's not what we predict, is it? That's about as far from it as possible. Yeah, you see similarities, but let's look at the rest of the story. And it falls apart. Cholesterol, we're all interested and worried about cholesterol and getting too much. Who has cholesterol like we do? Our closest relative in the animal kingdom turns out to be the garter snake. Has cholesterol just like ours. Not what they, yeah, I know some folks like that, but that's not the prediction that's being made. Teeth, that's important in archaeology. That's very resistant to decay, and we often use teeth, find it helpful. And yeah, the ape has teeth, but not that much like ours, the fish. You know that? Some of them, like the sheep's head, that's some pretty good chompers, and some of you may get envious there. You compare the apes, yep, there's teeth, but that's not like our teeth, is it? But the sheep's head, wow, it's got teeth just like ours. What are human teeth doing in the sheep's head's mouth? Or sheep's head teeth doing in ours? That's the rest of the story, and it begins to come apart. Foot structure, we're interested in that from the footprints down at Glen Rose. Who has foot structure like ours. Some will say, well, maybe that was an ape that was walking along. Well, that wouldn't help the evolutionist because the ape is up with us according to them a long ways from the dinosaurs. But you look at the ape's foot, and he's got a hand for a foot. That doesn't look alike at all, would never be confused. But you look at the foot of the glacial bear, of course he's a quadruped and has claws, but his feet, his skeletal, you remove the claws, and that skeleton is just virtually identical. You'd have to look close to see a difference. Not the ape, but the glacial bear. Tear enzyme, well, that's a very complex chemical, the lysosome, but it's kind of like little Pac-Man going around in our eyes eating bacteria. We need that. Well, the chicken needs that too. When he's laying the egg, he needs some Pac-Man eating the bacteria to keep that cleaned up. And he has exactly the same complex chemical. Hundreds of amino acids perfectly arranged precisely to form the enzyme. And the nematode, same lysosome. I don't know why the nematode needs it, but the chicken and we and the nematode have the same thing. It's not just similar, it's virtually identical. That's not what we predict, is it? Or the evolutionist. Blood antigen A, our closest relative is the butterbean. Just what we thought, right? And brain hormone, okay, very complex. We're proud of our brain, and hormones ought to be really up there on the geologic column. Here comes the cockroach again. He gets around. Here's the statement from Discover. Don't squash that roach, he may be your cousin. The cockroach and man share not a similar, but the same, a common brain hormone. Now, when we look at the picture of similarities, here's the rest of the story. They don't tell you this. They tell you half of the story and effectively is a lie. When you see the rest of the story, their story falls apart. And so they don't tell it. Similarity indicates common ancestry, except when it doesn't. And it doesn't a lot of times, but that part they don't tell you. This is a mosaic pattern. We predict similarities as they do, but different types. Blue tile here where the designer needs it, and a blue tile there. That's a design. Branching, gradual continuum, that's a different story. But that's not what we see. When we look at the fossil evidence, just summarizing the beginning, the fossil trees, not the fossils, similarities, any of the evidence you're looking at, we see it favors creation. I think eloquently saying creation. When you look at the whole story, not just the propaganda that's taught. See how much fun I have as a debater trying to... We just have a good time. And you see why they don't want to debate. Transitional forms are a critical part of the evidence when we're talking about fossils. If you're going to show evolution, you got to show it went from here to here to here. How else would you know something evolved? That's the story. And we've got lots of stories that's being told, but you need to look carefully at the stories. I think Darwin was more honest than most of them today. He says their innumerable transitional forms must have existed. This is from Origin of the Species. But why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the rock? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this is perhaps the greatest objection which can be urged against my theory. You want to bring the fossils up? This is not speaking of evolution. This is the best, strongest, greatest objection that there is, the fossils. because they're speaking in a different direction. And Darwin acknowledged that. Now, he predicted that over the years we get more gaps filled, we get more collecting, and I think it's just the opposite. We have the gaps more clearly defined. David Rapp, we referred to earlier, curator of the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History, which is the largest fossil museum in the United States. He says it's really a bigger problem now than it was then. He, Darwin, quoting here from the Field Museum of Natural History Bulletin, he was embarrassed by the fossils. The fossils are speaking, but they're not saying what they say they say. He was embarrassed by the fossil record because it didn't look the way he predicted it would. It did not meet his predictions. It's an embarrassment. Well, we're now 120 years after Darwin. The knowledge of the fossil record has been greatly expanded. We now have 250,000 fossil species, but the situation hasn't changed much. Ironically, we have even fewer examples of evolutionary transition than we had in Darwin's time. Some of the ones he pointed to have fallen apart. A few, but it's not what is predicted. There should be full. Everything came from this progression. There ought to be transitional fossils everywhere. No. Got even less than we had in Darwin's time, and he says the lack of it was the greatest objection. They're speaking, but they're not saying what the evolutionist wants us to say. By this, I mean the classic cases of Darwinian change in the fossil record, such as the evolution of the horse in North America, have had to be discarded. And you all knew that's been discarded, right? You've seen that in the text. No, you still see it in the textbooks, but the leading authority says, no, we don't have that anymore. Why? Well, let's just look quickly at the story. This is the way it's presented in the textbook. You see, in North America, the horse is getting bigger and bigger and evolving. Well, for one thing, right here, within 20 miles of Lubbock, we excavated a fossil that kind of messes that up. It was a 9-foot donkey known as Ascentius gigantus. Right in the middle of that chart kind of messes up the picture. They don't talk about that. You've all heard about that? No, probably not. But up at the top, we've got Eohippus. And if you don't know Eohippus, you're probably not going to pass this section in biology. What does Eohippus mean? Well, Hydrocatherium is the way it's in most of the charts, and the way it was titled to start with, named in 1840 by English geologist Richard Owen, who invented the term, which he identified as the word Hydrocatherium means like a hydrax. Not like a horse, like a hydrax. Cute little critters, rock conies sometimes called. He said that's what it was like, and that's what it reminded him of, but that's not the way it's presented here. 2016 from the Natural History Museum in Oxford, the evolutionary origin of the modern horse can trace back to the first horse, Hydrocatherium, like a hydrax, but they use it to talk about the horse. Well, does that look like a horse? It fits their story, but I mean, if you look closely at what they're saying, oh, wait a minute, maybe you could put a saddle on him, but I don't think that looks much like a horse. And others have disagreed, and notice in Wikipedia, hydrax is sometimes described as being the closest living relative to the elephant. Yeah, I can see the similarity. I don't think that looks like an elephant, but that's the way you argue with similarities. It's just fly by the seat of your pants and it looks like this, it looks like it, or just depend on who's doing the looking. The horse story begins with Hydrocatherium, like a hydrax, which I don't think has anything to do with a horse or an elephant. It looks like a hydrax, a good hydrax. The rest of them we find together contemporaneously in the fossil record. For example, here at Ashfall Fossil Beds, In Nebraska, you find all 5 of the following buried together, not having evolved one to the other over billions of years. They're all contemporaneous. No picture of evolution here. The first one is not a horse. The other 5 are like big horses, little horses, variations in horses that we see. And there were more variations in the past, and that's gone downhill. That is fitting our picture. Does not say evolution. And that's that's what most people would say. Well, we've got a few examples. No, not really. It's in the textbook, but that's not a good example. Archaeopteryx is supposed to be the perfect transitional fossil between lizard and bird. He's got awfully good feathers in this restoration. This is the fossil. Beautiful fossil, excellent feathers preserved. But they say, look out here on the edge of the wings, he's got claws. That's very primitive. Well, other birds lost their claws. Maybe that, I'm not sure that's uphill. They lost something that becomes useful. We do find modern birds like the Hoatzin in South America got exactly the same structure on their wings, and they're modern birds. A real challenge to the picture of bird evolution has come here from Texas Tech. Fossil bird shakes evolutionary hypothesis here from Nature. Fossil remains of 2 crow-sized birds, 75 million years older than Archaeopteryx, have been found. Wait a minute. You're supposed to have Archaeopteryx between the lizard and the bird. He's leading to the bird, not there yet. No, birds got there way before he did. You can't have the parents older than the kids, can you? That kind of messes up the picture. Dr. Chatterjee, that I have worked with on occasion, curator of paleontology at the Museum of Texas Tech University, found the fossils, say they have advanced avian features. They look like a crow before Archaeopteryx. So how's Archaeopteryx going to be the transition that leads to birds? Blows it. Thank you, Lubbock, for that help. This was in the news fairly recently. A 4-legged whale. Okay, that would look kind of like a transition, wouldn't it? You'd have to have some, you ought to have a bunch of that kind of thing leading to the whale from something that had 4 legs. And when that discovery was made, it made news around the world. NPR, scientists discover fossil of a 4-legged whale. Newsweek, scientists have found fossil of a deadly 4-legged whale. New York Post, previously unknown 4-legged whale found. BBC, new species of ancient 4-legged whale discovered. Wow. Now, what that says is, boy, we've really been needing this, and everybody is telling you about it all around the world. Well, what did they find? There he is. I see a 4-legged whale on his shirt, but where are the legs? That's him in total, the 4-legged whale. Now, when it was published in the royal proceedings, the red part is their representation of what was actually found. You didn't find any legs. You eliminate what they interpolated, and there he is. Did he have legs? Who knows? Have flippers? How can you? Was he deadly? Related to the whales? Have nothing to do? You got no idea. This is the story they need to tell, and that's the way they draw it. But you look carefully at what they're saying, and it just falls apart. We've got Stephen Stanley in reference to not this example, but a couple of others. He said the fossil record does not convincingly document a single transition from one species to another. I was debating a geologist down at Lamar, and he had a big thick book. He says, this is a whole book. Every one of them is a transitional form. What do you mean, no transitional form? Because he said they were. Well, if you believe in evolution and they all got there by evolution, yeah, it had to be a transitional form. He's a man of great faith. He thinks all of them are. But when you look at the evidence that you should be able to see, Darwin recognized, now this is a problem. And there's not one. You're perhaps the leading representative paleontologist in the country still alive today. It'd be Stephen Stanley. His partner, who he published with a number of times, Stephen Gould from Harvard, that we referred to earlier, recently deceased, had article in Natural History for 30 years, every month. Wrote a tome before he died. This is his legacy. Big, thick, you need a bookstop that make a good one. But it's an interesting book and very well done, well researched. It's a lifetime of research. And basically what he's saying, you sum it up in one word, the fossil record is represented by the term stasis. Now that's the theme of his book, published actually the same year he passed away. Stasis. Little or no evolutionary change in a species is the way Wikipedia defines it. He discusses it this way with similar illustration to the one here, spread over millions of years, no net change, with beginning and end points substantially the same. Yeah, that's what we would predict. That's what he says we see. Just exactly what we predict. Stasis existed in overwhelming abundance, as every paleontologist always knew and always published in the textbooks. Not on your life they'd lose their job. I've seen that happen. This is, he says, the most common pattern in the fossil record. Now you see how our predictions, just exactly what we predict. And here is the critical point. You got to have a change from, this is the most common pattern, the primary signal of the fossil record. Then he points out this, Darwin's expectations, we might say predictions, defined evolution as gradual change. In this context, stasis can only record sorrow and disappointment. Now, how'd you like to face that in debate with the most representative paleontologist that we know today? It's an imperial signal of stunning contrariness. PhDs like to say things in complex ways. It just says, we fell flat on our face. Empirical falsification. Not theoretical, but here's the hard evidence. It's falsified. It doesn't verify. Well, he's passed away, and probably in his place today is Donald Prothero, professor of geology at Caltech, and been author of 5 geology textbooks. And if you're trying to get a quotation supporting evolution from a geologist, this is the one, probably best known today. And he refers to Gould's comment. Many paleontologists came forward and pointed out that the geological literature was one vast monument to stasis, with relatively few cases where anyone had observed gradual evolution. He's got his faith in a few that you look at close and like the horse falls apart. But it's the fossil record is a monument to stasis. Paleontologists all over the world saw that stasis was the general pattern, which is exactly what Gould said, and it is still the consensus 40 years later, today. That's what paleontologists know. Stasis, the monument that represents the fossil record, opposite of evolution. Now, if you're an evolutionist, you're sort of slinking down in your chair at this point. That's not what you expect the fossils to say. When we evaluate the evidence, based on what the contrary expectations are for the evolutionists, the antagonistic witness, it was Darwin's biggest problem then, it's worse now. They're embarrassed by the fossil record. It has been debunked, these examples like the horse. It's a headache. Now, this is what they have to say about it. It delights the creationist. This is their description. Just planted, advanced the very first time. It's an explosion, like out of a magic box. We see mosaic similarities, not branching patterns of similarities, and is a monument to stasis. Who do you think favors the evidence? Who is served best by the evidence? The creationist or the evolutionist? If you're an evolutionist, you want to debate with this staring you in the face, I guess you can call the leading authorities liars, and sometimes they do. And without the fossils, you remember the conclusion? Evolution is an outrageous hypothesis. Amen. I think that's exactly right. The fossil record speaks eloquently, loudly, plainly, but it speaks in favor of creation. Just exactly what we predict is verified by the evidence, even as the enemy acknowledges. That's the case when we evaluate the evidence. As you've been with us this week, you can see continually the facts fit. And if you're just honest with the evidence, the facts, this is where it leads. When you look at the evidence for Jesus Christ, it's exactly like that. Here's the prophecies of his birth and of his life. Not that he's going to be riding the white charger, the victorious warrior, but he's going to be rejected. Prophets knew that. It's interesting that, as we pointed out Sunday morning, you look at the interpretation of Isaiah from the Essenes 200 to 300 years before Christ. Yep, they were looking for a Messiah that was rejected, that was crucified, that would be resurrected. All of that's foreseen in Scripture. Here's the evidence. If you're convinced by that, you know that's true, then you need to be honest enough to stand up and confess it. And then pledge allegiance to him who is the Son of God. Proved that by 500 witnesses at once to the resurrection, and testified to by the apostles. Eyewitness testimony is really good evidence. You get 12 people in court stand up and point the finger at you and say, I saw him do it. You're in trouble. Good evidence to believe that Jesus is God's Son. We call upon you to confess that, repent of your sins as he demands, and be baptized for the remission of sins to receive the promises that the Son of God made. Promise of eternal life. If you're subject to his invitation, won't you come while we stand and sing?
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his
Mercy and his grace, in the mansions bright and holy, he'll prepare for us a place when we all get to heaven. Day, joy.
appreciate it, Don. Great, wonderful lessons this week. We appreciate it. Hope you have a safe trip home. Welcome all the visitors tonight. It's been great. This week has been really good. We learned a lot. We heard Don before when he came with us several years ago and learned a lot then. We've learned a lot more now. It's great for you to be here. We don't have a lot of announcements. The only major one that we have is in the morning, the men's have a breakfast, 8 o'clock at Red Zone. So those that can be there, please be there. We're going to still have the Q&A? Okay. Okay, after this is over, if you got any questions, Don will get back up and answer your questions. Right now, we'll have our closing prayer so the little ones can get home. Dear Almighty Heavenly Father, we are so grateful, Lord. You have blessed this congregation in so many ways. And we're thankful for Don, who stands up for our beliefs and our creation to prove to others that you are our God and you are the creator of this universe and of our world and of us. We ask, Lord, that you be with each one of us as we go about our business, that we remember who we are. We are Christians, and we let our light shine upon the world. And if we do fall short, we ask for forgiveness. Give us safe journeys, Lord. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
What's that? Yes. Don't forget. Okay. Thank you.
Creationist system of belief where the evolutionists believe in an organism or a simple design that grows into a complex,
Yes.
versus creation is the opposite.
Yes.
Where it's complex and refined, and the body degrades and falls apart.
Yeah. We're going downhill.
These people, the evolutionists, are scientists, right? They believe in science. What do they do with the second law of thermodynamics?
Deny it. No.
Which
There's
says,
some very sophisticated attempts, and they'll tell you, you just don't understand it.
would describe it for people. The second law of thermodynamics says,
That says things go downhill.
goes downhill.
We didn't know that, did we? That's the sophisticated way to say it.
They lie.
Everything, every transaction, you don't break even. You lose a little bit each time, and you try your best to get some kind of a mechanism that's going to overcome that, and it doesn't work. And we learned that just a couple of hundred years ago with the Industrial Revolution. And it works by very sophisticated rules. Dr. Henry Morris was professor of hydraulics, geology, and thermodynamics at Virginia Tech, was head of the department there of engineering for about 20 years. He's the one that wrote the Genesis flood. I think he knows thermodynamics, and that was a good part of that book. I do have a lesson on that. That's one of the ones we skipped. The laws of science, it's primarily about thermodynamics, and if you want to know in detail, I'd refer you again to the website, bible.ca. My part is /tracks. If you just remember bible.ca and then search Don Patton, you'll get there. You've got a landing page with about 12 different things you can click on. You click on the projector, and that takes you to the videos. And the laws of science is the one that deals with that. I think there are 2, maybe 3 sessions there under that heading, each one 28 minutes, that we did at a TV station there in Little Rock fairly recently, the last 3 years. I think it's, well, it's opposite of going uphill. It's going downhill. Which one fits creation, which one fits evolution? It's pretty simple. We looked at the picture last night of the GTO that was, 60 years old. It's not made better by time. You see the house, the barn. Wait long enough, you get an extra room and things get brighter and shinier. That story doesn't fly, does it?
My point is that they claim to be scientists, and yet in science, they
Right.
deny it.
The standard answer is that the formulas for thermodynamics involve a closed system. If you bring in extra energy from an outside source, then you can make things, you can overpower that. You got an little acorn, you get a lot of sunlight direction from the DNA, and you can make it go uphill. You can make water go uphill with a motor or pump. But you've got to have the energy outside, and you've got to have information in order to make that work. The acorn has it, and the electrical pump that makes the water go up, they ignore that part. But the world itself is open to the energy of the sun, or the earth, and so all this extra energy overpowers it. That's the best they can do. But in the practical application that we see, sun or no sun, we see it going downhill. And that's just a little tap dance around the obvious. Other questions? Yes.
The idea of cavemen with primitive thinking, is that just something that they have, my children have asked me that, and I'm like, I don't think that's a real thing, because I think God created Adam as an intelligent being.
Yeah.
Where did
We
they
got
go?
cavemen today in a lot of places. People live in caves. I spent a lot of time in caves as a spelunker. Let me go through a quick summary here to give you an illustration. Well, one obvious summary is by Bernard Wood, fairly recently here, 2014, in the book Human Evolution, published by Oxford. He's at George Washington University, professor of human origins. Fairly qualified, but here's his summary. Even with all the fossil evidence from the past 50 years, a convincing hypothesis for the origin of Homo, that's the origin of man, remains elusive. We don't have the answer. Now that's the bottom line. But let me give you an example of what's being done. Propaganda has billions of dollars being spent to teach evolution. We're looking here at the Perot Museum, $185 million just to get started. We got some experts in museum technology here with us tonight, and very often it's propaganda for evolution, and that is why this museum was built. And we see the kids just soaking it up, and it is tremendously effective. And that's one of the reasons we're trying to get one built to tell the truth. And it's not hard to do, but you need 185 million. It's a big help. Here's a publication they put out just recently. Meet your extended family at a new evolution exhibit. Now that's what they're doing. That's their business. For the next few months, visitors to the Perot Museum and Nature of Science in Jerusalem, in Dallas, brain slip, will have a rare opportunity to see fossils of ancient hominids, that's ancestors of humans, up close. Meet your extended family. This is their propaganda under the heading of Origins. Here's ancient human ancestors. Reflect on what it means to be human. Like, scratch like this. That's what it means. I don't know. One of the greatest fossil discoveries of the past half century you're going to get to see that will be on display. Two new species of human relatives, the Australopithecus civata and Homo naledi. They've got them there. And this is the latest and greatest and best that they have to offer, and you get to see it at the Perot Museum. Fossils from the cradle of mankind. Exhibition of fossils, two recently discovered ancient human relatives. Well, that sounds great, and that's the way they present it, and that's about all they present. There's the picture, and this is what it is. I say, well, let's just go back and see what they found. And you get into the technical literature, beginning here with Homo naledi, discovered 2013, actually. 1,500 individuals, 1,500 bones, but reported in Science in detail. So here's where you go to get the facts, usually. And what kind of story do they tell? Well, first place, they're unable to determine an age. Now, wait a minute. They got 1,500 bones and unable to determine an age. Now, I've been dealing with these folks long enough to know what that means. That means they don't say what they want them to say, and they're not going to tell you. 1,500 bones, they're going to get an age, but they're not going to tell you. Sloped lower face, bears little resemblance to humans. Now, what Perot is saying, small cranium and ape-like creature. Oh, boy, that's a real threat to our faith. Then you get to the real facts, it's a different story. Then we look at Australopithecus civata. And here's the picture in Science. Looked like an extinct ape with a tiny brain, a chimp-sized body, similar to the hands of apes that climb trees, came with a long primitive arm that suggests it often hoisted itself up into the trees. What does that sound like?
An ape.
The heel is very primitive. Skeletons, their analysis convinced few, convinced the ones at Perot Museum. No one's redrawing their family trees, except in the Perot Museum. But when you get to the technical facts, the details, that's all you have to do. Just where's the facts? And it just falls apart. So that's the kind of thing that you're dealing with. And this is supposed to be the latest and the greatest. The rest of the story is a comedy. And it's embarrassing to tell that story, but we also have in that website that we told you, I believe there are 2 28-minute sessions on fossil men. Okay, other questions?
Some of the fossils they find, dinosaurs in particular, their heads are old, their necks are curved, and their heads are back.
The death pose, death throw.
Yes, but I heard that was a sign of drowning.
That's what we have seen. And you know, if you've got enough of the dinosaur to see that, that's what you see, inevitably. Not only that death pose, neck drawn around, which is associated with drowning, you see marine fossils, which is not where the dinosaurs lived. But you don't find dinosaur fossils without marine fossils. Isn't that interesting? I've talked to several experts and dug up more dinosaurs than I have, and they said we've never seen it without the marine fossils. And that's in the middle of Texas.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Everybody understands everything. Great. Well, we thank you very much for the invitation to be with you. And I love to get to talk about some of my favorite subjects, as you hopefully can tell. The website I would recommend. It's not always up to date, but there's a lot of really good information, especially the videos are pretty well up to date and hopefully can be useful. It's encouraging to go into the control center and see 2, 3, 10, 12 of those videos are going 24 hours a day, around the clock, around the world. And you can tell where they're from. We're getting the story out, and we appreciate your encouragement and your help in accomplishing that. Thank you very much. Yes?
Could you say the website one more time?
Bible.ca is the main website. It's a huge site, about 40,000 pages. My part is about a third. And you can, if you get to Bible.ca, you can navigate there, but my part is /tracks, TRACKS. That's the main thing we had. We've done a lot more than tracks since then, but that's the way it started. Steve Rudd of Canada is the one who runs that site. He's very brilliant, prolific writer. Wrong about a few things. He disagrees with me, but 95% would be right on, and it's an effective tool when you're trying to do evangelism, because 2/3 of it, that's what it's about. All right, thank you again very much. Good to see you. Well, thank you.